Welcome to Rooted to Thrive, conversations to elevate our humanity. I'm your host, Rochelle Peterson Ansari, Professor P for short. This is your podcast sanctuary for cultivating mindsets and skills to elevate our shared humanity. We're taking a deep dive into practical strategies to evolve as anti-racist, culturally competent, and inclusive individuals and leaders. In each episode, we're bringing you real-world examples and actionable takeaways. We're going to talk about personal growth, fostering connection, and creating positive change that dismantles systemic barriers and creates environments where all of us are valued, empowered, and activate our collective power. This is Rooted to Thrive. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rooted to Thrive, conversations that elevate our humanity. I am your host, Rochelle Peterson Ansari, aka Professor P, and I am so glad you're joining me and my guest today for our conversation that helps us center our human dignity. Now, today we have a Dr. Corinne Green. I like saying that. Dr. Corinne Green, founder and CEO of HRMOM LLC, and it's a company that specializes in organizational development, talent management, and HR compliance for Black, minority, and woman-owned businesses. And in addition to more than 20 years of HR experience and multiple certifications, Corinne is a newly minted graduate of Regent University with her doctorate in strategic leadership. Yay! And soon to be author of a book for Black Christian women to balance dual identities by aligning faith, mental wellness, and authenticity to lead boldly in workplaces and in our society. Now, I've known Corinne for over 20 years now. Can you believe it? Over 20 years.
Yes.
Yes, and we worked together at Arcadia University in student affairs, and we grew to become friends, and I would say even family.
Yes.
I consider her daughters my nieces. And it's just been a wonderful journey since then. I shared with another audience almost about a year ago now that a pivotal moment in my own identity and leadership transformation was inspired by Corinne. So, as a young professional in her first, I think it was your first full time
It
post.
was.
Yep, in
It
your
was.
first full time position after graduate school, I watched her stand on her faith in a way that I hadn't witnessed before. She was a role model, right? And so she was in this role that required her to be available for emergencies and a rotation of other professionals for a college campus and their residential students, right? And she made it crystal clear that there was some non-negotiables for her and that
Absolutely.
she could not be scheduled on days where she had her Bible study and her church service. I said, all right now. That was really pivotal for me because, like I said, I hadn't seen that before. But this is someone that at a young age was standing on principle in a way that I needed to grow. So I'm so excited for us to talk today. 20 years later, Dr. Green Corinne, how you doing today?
Oh, I am doing great. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Rochelle. Yes, you are right. It's been an amazing journey. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of your professional and personal life. Yes, we say friends that become family or family. So thank you for being family. And yes, I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm excited to share and just really push folks into thriving to being the best version of themselves.
Very good. Yes, excellent. Well, our topic today is the data empathy duo.
Mm.
Looking at empathy driven and data informed decision making. So, to get
Yeah.
started, why don't you share a little bit about your background and how you got started in this work?
Yeah, so this is for me, what I do is really an extension of who I am as a person. I got started in HR and primarily working in organizations in their training and development department. Like you mentioned, it started in academia, honestly. And then after I transitioned out of academia, I went into corporate and went into the nonprofit sector. And one of the things I realized is that people are our best and biggest asset in the workplace, and how we treat them and how we involve them in our decisions, and how we move with them as a group is everything for the experience in the workplace. And so for me, I became a what I call a collector and connector of people. Like I just absolutely love to hear people's stories, love to explore their gifts, figure out where they fit, figure out how we can serve them, how I can serve them. So for me, my role in HR, being able to not only write policy and implement policy, and but also influence and implement culture. So the people factor for me has been everything. On the, I'll say the academic or pedigree side of the house, I have an undergrad degree in social work. And so there's that connection to people again and being able to help, and a master's in communications, which is also why I talk a lot. But I have a master's in communications with an emphasis in training and development, which really helps me in the teaching and academic field. And then my doctorate is in strategic leadership, and primarily specializing in authentic leadership, in which how we think about how our self-discovery of ourselves really impacts how we inspire and lead others. So for me, it's been sort of a holistic collective approach. Uh, my background, I come from Brooklyn, New York. I was born and raised in the projects. I'm first generation everything, first generation college grad, business owner, doctor, first generation, um, whatever you want to name it, black wealth. I'm literally it. And so that those identities really allow me to push others to thrive as well, because I know that it's possible and I've seen it done. And so for me, it's just a collective way to be able to be an extension of who I am, my authentic self.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
And that just so aptly runs into the question that I was going to ask you because we want our listeners to grow and thrive in their
Mm-hmm.
ability to do anti-oppressive work, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
to not just work, but to do it in an anti-oppressive way
Yeah.
that upholds human dignity. And so the topic today, the data empathy duo. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that relates to thriving anti-oppressive workplaces and or
Yeah.
leadership?
Yeah. Um, that's a very interesting question, and I love the intersection of it because it allows us to really think about where we are, what data we have on ourselves, right? So where does our experience and our stories fit in, and how are we experiencing oppression, or how we, in some cases, may have been the oppressor. So really doing that self-exploratory work to really say, where am I in this space, and then looking at the impact of the organization or where I am in society and workplace and other communities around me. And so the data is always there. It's how we interpret and interact with the data, right? And so when we look at our own experience, and I always say your experience is validated data. You don't need any justification for it. Your experience is real. Your emotions are real. What you've experienced and what you've seen happen can also be used as collected data, right?
Mhm.
So I usually start with what has been my experience in the space, right? I know for myself as a As a young Black girl growing up in urban America, I didn't necessarily have access to a number of different things. In our community, we experienced a lot of oppression as it relates to drug and abuse and alcoholism and just lack of access to education and technology and things of that nature. So it wasn't until I got into college um, that I was able to experience a different level of access. And so all of that for me is data, right? And then when we take a look at the workplace, when we look at the statistics that exist around Black women in particular, this is where a lot of my research comes in. We look at Black women being the largest and most growing um, access to higher education than any other demographic. In this day and age, we have about 7% Black women at the doctoral level, a postgraduate degree level, but yet they still remain the least paid and the least to be progressed into higher levels of leadership, right? So the data is there. It's like, okay, we have this experience, we have these DEI initiatives, and I sometimes I don't like the word DEI initiative because the connotative meaning has been associated with, hey, someone's getting selected in a handout or
Mhm.
just because of that factor, and not necessarily us revisiting the impact of how do we consider this factor as a value asset in making decisions,
Mhm.
right? And so when I look at the data that tells us that Black women are the most educated,
Mhm.
but yet the least paid.
Mhm.
We've seen Black women be the least progress into higher levels of leadership, but yet there's these initiatives that says that we are being inclusive and we're being considerate. Nonetheless, we're seeing the numbers that that's not happening, right?
Right.
So here I am as a Black woman with experience, degree, pedigree, and all that, and there's this white male that may have progressed at a higher salary grade than I would age out to be, even in my 60s or
Mhm.
into retirement. And they may be less experienced and less educated. So that tells me there's something in the data that's
Right.
being missed.
Right. Oh,
And so we
definitely.
have to look at those numbers. We have to look at the history of organizations. How were they developed? How these cultures or organizations came about? What systems or what benefits uh, supported this organization in their growth? And how are they making decisions? And are they using the actual data to make these decisions?
Hmm. Okay, great. So you talk about this duo, right? It's
Hmm.
data and it's empathy. So break it down for us, right? So we're
Yeah.
saying be empathy driven. What are you talking about?
Empathy is I'm putting myself in the other person's shoes. I'm trying to
Mm,
see their experience from their point of view, their lens. So
mm,
in order to do that, we have to understand a little bit of their story, right? And so there's this self-assessment side where individuals are assessing themselves and willing to share. I talk about this in my book in terms of in the Black church, we call it testimonial, right? I'm willing to share, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a negative experience. It could be a positive experience or outlook. And so being able to understand these stories of the individuals in the workplace, where do they come from? What happens in their life outside of this space, right? Who are they at their core? And where does all of this fit into the work that I'm having them do and the work they're performing in my organization? And so when organizational leaders tap into that, not only do they get a more less they see less turnover, but they get a more committed workforce and they get a more valuable workforce and high productivity because these individuals realize that this workplace cares about me. And
mhm,
so this um, empathy driven leadership really comes from my ability to understand the people in whom are working with me, not for me,
mhm,
but who is working with me, and their stories and where they come from and what skill sets they bring and what are their talents and what happens in their life outside of this space. Right.
right.
And so the more I can integrate that into our work, the more we can get a holistic and a more a whole work environment in which everybody can benefit from.
Okay, so the data, so the empathy driven is really the types of questions you're asking, and that's
Types.
really beyond performance.
Yep.
It's about getting to know your workforce, your team
And
members.
not only just getting to know them, but involving them in decisions, right?
Okay.
Um and so is that opportunity in that talent acquisition portion, like when you're
Hmm.
interviewing and you're asking questions. Of course, I'm an HR person and I know this in and out. We have those questions we cannot ask, right? But there are ways in which you can ask questions that help individuals be able to share information with you that allows you to understand how they will fit in your workplace. So you
Mm-hmm.
may ask them a question, how does this position fit with your lifestyle right now, what you're looking for? And right. And so someone may say, I'm really looking for a position that allows me to be creative, that allows me to use time to focus on to bring in more of who I am into the workplace. And so that looks like, hey, I might be looking for a position that's more flexible in my hours. I might be looking
Right.
for a position that allows me to show up when I'm most creative. And maybe I'm
Hmm.
most creative at 3 a.m. in the morning. If I
Hmm.
have to be in office 9 to 5, that's not going to work for me.
Right.
But if I get $1 billion widget idea from you at 3 a.m., I don't care when I got it, right? But at that point, it allows me to have those authentic conversations in that talent piece to say, okay, how is this position aligning with who you are and who you want to be? And those traditional questions. Where do you want to be in the next 5 years, right?
Right.
And those type of questions is basic, but
Hmm.
how are you able to bring yourself into the workplace in an authentic, safe way? What do you need from us to make sure that you can show up in your best
Mm.
way? And so
Yes.
those are the type of questions that in that talent acquisition period you might be asking. And then once they're there, you're really including them. This is that inclusive piece in
Hmm.
every decision. So you're not making decisions from the top down. Maybe it takes you a little bit more time to have a group discussion or be inclusive. But if you're a $1 billion tech company and you're producing widgets for all to use, and there's someone on your team that can bring experience and feedback around, how does this look like for a community that may not have access to
Hmm.
Wi-Fi or technology or whatever? And so, how can we make this product more inclusive?
Right.
And
Right.
so this is how we need to sort of design and think about this program or think about this product or this service. And so without that in your space, you miss that opportunity to be imaginative and creative and have a greater impact than you could have imagined.
Yeah. Have you experienced a successful initiative or attempt to do just that?
Yeah. And so in my experience, I work with organizations of all different sizes, right? And
Hmm.
so I primarily, when I started out HRMOM, we really focused on small Black minority women-owned businesses because I realized there was a gap in them, in those businesses being able to have access to organizational structure and development. Most of the times, these businesses start with what I call guerrilla and hustle sort of passion. They got
Hmm.
something, they're selling it, they're doing well at it, but then the whole back of the house isn't put together.
Right.
And so we started out doing a lot of development work. Now we're working with organizations as it relates to impacting their policy and their organizational culture. And these are typically mid-sized businesses that are looking to decrease their employee turnover or figure out what is it within their organization that's requiring that is causing employees not to have a great experience.
Hmm.
And we realized this a lot after COVID when people started working from home or coming back into the workforce, and really what the true needs were of individuals in the workforce. People were dealing with grief on a number of different levels, and it didn't necessarily mean the loss of a loved one. It could have been the loss of status, the loss of community, the loss of a job. It was a number of different levels in which people were dealing with grief. We saw that people were dealing with that sense of community and not being able to be in the workplace and around their colleagues and things of that nature, and also losing some creativity because they were, isolated for quite some times, for years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so now, what I've seen in organizations is, um, one particular organization I worked with, we were able to take a look at their policies, their HR
Mm-hmm.
policies, and you have your federal, state, and local policies, and what it means to comply with those policies. But then you have your other policies that are based on culture of your organization, your dress code, your bereavement days, your PTO policy. Those are not mandated by local, state, and federal. So
Mm-hmm.
that really depends on the organization and what the organization's commitment is. And so we've been working with organizations that have adopted changes to their bereavement policies and mental health and wellness policies that
Mm-hmm.
really allow their employees to take advantage of what we call wellness days, which are
Mm-hmm.
days set aside, paid days where they can take one a quarter, where they can tend to their mental health and wellness needs, where they are not required to do work, not required to do volunteer work, but this is a day that you can take off and do what you need to do for yourself, a sort of a reset. So
Right.
organizations have been able to put these policies in place to help support not only their health benefits, but also their wellness policies. And one of the biggest has been the bereavement days,
Okay.
and the expansion of bereavement policies. And so typically, most organizations give anywhere from 3 to 5 days based off of um, the person in their relationship. And so, what we've been able to do is to help organizations understand that, one, in some communities, relationship and identity as family is built different. It doesn't necessarily mean blood, and particularly in our Black communities, your auntie is your auntie, whether
Mm-hmm.
they related to you by blood or not, or your little cousins that you all grew up with is cousins, is family,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so whatever happens in their lives impact you. And so we've been able to expand bereavement days outside of just the 3 to 5 year. And again, we use the data. This goes back to that data driven. We want inclusive environments and we use the data. We know the traditional grief process takes about a year. So how can you give someone 3 to 5 days to grieve and expect them to report back to work at their highest level of functioning? It's not going to
Right.
work.
Right.
And so we've been able to help individuals expand those policies to 10 to 14 days.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations that are willing and to give 2 weeks of paid time, as well as expand opportunities into larger policies for FMLA to allow individuals to still be productive and be their best selves at work. But this all comes from understanding the culture of their employee workforce and what their needs were.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I
Sorry,
hear.
that was just a long answer to get
No,
to all of
that's
that.
yeah, but that's a successful initiative that people need to hear and need to know
Mhm.
that it's possible. And the you get optimal work, right? You get
Yes,
optimal performance as a result, as opposed to
absolutely.
somebody coming back in 3 to 5 days and it's like a zombie. They're there, but they're not actually functioning.
They're not functioning. Absolutely. Or the opposite, they don't come back to work.
Mm,
Because that happens a lot,
mm,
and particularly on leave policies,
mhm.
on leaves when individuals are in grief or, um, having a child, whatever. So the expansion of those policies really allow individuals to say, hey, there's some buy-in and this organization wants me here. And people are not
Yes.
working now for just benefits and money.
No.
They're working for a
Mhm.
whole number of different reasons. And so we have to figure out what motivates them to stay. And so we've seen a decrease in employee turnover, right?
Mhm.
Because people are able to report to work and show up to work, be productive when they are able at a time
Mhm.
that works for them under policies that works for their lifestyle at the moment.
Right. And I know this is not, exactly our topic, but it's related. It's on my mind. It's on a lot of
Mhm.
people's mind. There are a lot of people when you were talking about COVID and a lot of people returning and experiencing grief.
Hmm.
I was thinking about the fact that there are a lot of people who, well, and people having grief because they were isolated during COVID. Well, I'm hearing today that there are a lot of people resistant to going back in the office.
Hmm. Yeah, because there are a lot of resistance coming back into the office is because one, the human nature, we're adaptable, right? And
Mhm,
so we have adapted so long to what life looked like being by myself or in a silo, or this work can be performed at home, or
mhm,
this could have been an email meeting versus in person or whatever. So we've adapted to that and then we become comfortable with that. But we have to go back to our true identity. We were never designed to be in isolation. We were
mhm,
never designed to not be in community, right? And so, I'm a woman of faith and, I talk about the Bible and where that stands for me and my identity. You talked about that in
mhm,
some of the things I stand on. And so when I think about how God created us, and yes, Adam was created in God's image, right? In his likeness. But then he said it's not good for him to be alone. And it
mhm,
wasn't just companionship, and it wasn't just opportunity for a romantic relationship and creating Eve. It was also that opportunity for community,
mhm,
right? And so creating Eve, and then God himself didn't want to be alone. He said, let me make man, right? And so
mhm,
we're not supposed to be isolated. We're not supposed to be by ourselves. We were never designed to work like that. And so when we start to think about community and why people don't want to come back into the workplace, well, it's because of the workplace culture and what it
mhm,
did. And so,
mhm,
unless you decide as an organization, we're not going to be that type of culture anymore. We're not going to work you to the bone from 9 to 5. We're not going to not consider your voice in decisions. And so, this is the inclusive work environments piece again, right? How do we go back and repaint that picture? How do
right.
we undo our history? And that takes work. We know that
Mhm,
takes work in relationships. We know that take work in friendships. So it's going to take work in the workplace as well. How do we go back and undo that culture? And then how do we now make it appealing in an authentic way, right? Because we've seen after the George Floyd riots, we've seen all of the statements come out from organizations. We disown, we don't agree, we condemning such and such type of behavior. And then you go and talk to the folks who work for them and they was
mhm,
like,
mhm.
all this is still going on in here,
Right.
right? And it it
Mhm,
wasn't in it wasn't for the ones who were doing the work 10 to 15 years before that
right.
we were able to see they're serious about it. Or what young folks say today, they standing on business about it, right? Um, and so
Yeah.
we saw the Ben and Jerry's of the world. We weren't
Mm,
shocked at Ben and Jerry's response. Why weren't we shocked? Because they were doing this 10, 15 years ago.
right.
Now,
Right.
when you got an organization pop out and they say, "Oh, we condemn this and da 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 da," and it's like, y'all just started doing that because 2 years ago such and such was happening and we saw the headlines with X, Y, and Z going on, right? And so there was a lack of trust. It's like, now I don't want to go
Mhm,
back into this workplace to trust. And
mhm,
so, you know, it does take work for an organization to undo that history and intentionality.
mhm. And how do you recommend people get started? Like, how do they get
Yeah.
started in shifting that culture?
Yeah, and so it's what I call a team effort, and sometimes
Mhm,
I say it's a manage up versus manage down. And
mhm,
so when you have that experience and you have a boldness about yourself, like I do, and you say certain things and you mean certain things, it you may have to initiate it, right? So I've been in workplaces where I've seen individuals challenge policy and say,
mhm,
hey, this doesn't work for me, or I've seen them say, hey, let's revisit how we should do X, Y, and Z because of the impact on this particular community. So I've
mhm,
seen them serve in roles of advocacy. And so I would recommend two things. One, if you are in a position in which you can impact policy and culture, that you begin to consider yourself as a change agent and look
mhm,
for opportunities to do so. And then if you're not in that position and you have a boldness about you where you feel comfortable enough that you get to the leaders and get to the voices who do have that space and start bringing some of those issues to the forefront.
mhm,
Um, a, I know in today's political climate, it's so very tough to have these conversations, right? But again, we are seeing that there are organizations who are standing up and saying, hey, regardless of what happens in the political climate, these are the principles that we are continuing to stand upon.
Hmm.
And these are the initiatives that we will continue to push forward in the strategies that make us who we are.
Right.
And these are the type of people that we want working with us,
Hmm.
not for us, but working with us
Yes.
on this. And so that allows opportunity as well. So I mean, I would say get started either individually or collectively with a voice of someone who has that space and has that power.
That's right. Okay, great. Yeah, and so I'm thinking about that leader who's saying, yeah, something's up here. I'm not getting the results that I want, whether it's people, resisting coming back to the office because they're going to come back if they want to keep their job,
Hmm.
to keep the income at least for a little while, right? They're going to come
Yep.
back, but they're coming back kicking and screaming. Or they've heard, heard the leaders heard through the grapevine that people just don't want to do it. You said, see yourself as a change agent.
Hmm.
So if I were to put that hat on as a leader, I'm in the workplace and I want to be a change agent. What's my first step?
Yeah.
What? Mhm.
I would say your first step is to sit down and have a conversation with your manager or those that are in charge and say, "Hey, here's my authentic experience and here's why I'm here. One,
Mhm.
I'm here because at this moment for the paycheck. But
Mhm.
here's what I would love to be here for."
Right.
And this is an opportunity to say, here's where we are going wrong. This is why people are not returning back. And not only am I one, I might be one of many. I have the stories and people talk at the water cooler,
Hmm.
right? They talk in the bathroom.
Hmm.
There's a meeting in the ladies' room, right? So they talking everywhere. And so they're having the conversations about their experience in the workplace.
Hmm.
And it's not necessarily personal about a particular person, but it's about the collective and how things feel here. And so if you have enough data, right? Remember I said our stories are valid and you have enough conversations, then you have something to stand on to say, hey, this isn't just my experience, it's a collective of us. And here's how we would like to change it if you want us here.
So,
And and
so
so
the
that
lead,
allows that opportunity.
gotcha. So the leader, then, if the person who's initiating this is the leader, then that person would need to collect the stories. They
Yes.
need to go and collect those stories.
Hmm. And they can
Un-
give space, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but they
Mhm.
can give space and opportunity to do that, right? So
Mhm.
there's a number of ways you can collect those stories, whether it be a survey, whether it be a focus group, whether it be you bring in an outside consultant to do
Mhm.
some sort of research and say, hey, I want you to tell me what's going on in my workforce, right?
Mhm.
One of the shows I love watching is Undercover Boss, where the boss
Okay.
goes in and they go in and they get all this information, but not only does they bless other people and everything, but they also get a lot of information about what's happening on the ground, right?
Right.
That they may have been removed from. And I think a lot of times, I'll just say it, our C-level executives are removed, right?
Mhm.
They're creating standards, programs, initiatives, all type of stuff, but they're not the ones on the ground doing the
Mhm.
work. They're not in the trenches all the time, right? And so being able to gather that data and that information and say, aha, because we're giving them the numbers. We're saying, hey, we
Mhm.
need to hire this position because it's we have turnover. But why they only stay 6 months? That's something we need to talk about, right?
Right.
And so your HR departments, if you have one, they have this data and information, right? And they also have the ear of the people, and so they can gather that information as well.
Okay, that's powerful. Good stuff.
Hmm.
Some good strategies there.
Yeah.
So, I'm starting to think about this book that you're working on too, right?
Oh, the book.
Because it is connected, right, to this data empathy duo. Tell us a little bit about your upcoming piece that you're going to
I
share with the
am,
world. Yes.
yes, becoming God's girl is a labor of love.
Mhm,
I will say that it allows one to uh, shape their identity in such a way where they will be comfortable becoming that voice and that
mhm,
advocate and that person challenging, stepping up boldly in the workplace because they're coming from a space where it's bigger than them. It's not just about my family and I surviving, eating, um, what we like to say, surviving, thriving, and leaving a legacy, but it's also about the collective and it's also about the impact of the larger community. So the book really take you through your own journey and give you opportunity to identify your strengths, your talents. It gives you a lot of data and history about your experience as a written from the perspective of a Black Christian woman,
mhm,
and then being able to um, step into a space that allows you to live freely, like knowing
mhm,
that data and information and what your real goal is right now. It talks about Black women also deserving to live the soft life. We've been marginalized as a community that Black women are expected to be strong and we're expected to do everything. We have this strong Black woman syndrome that started not necessarily in the workplace, but all the way back slavery
mhm,
time, right?
mhm, mhm,
And our place in the world where uh, others or other women have been able to live softly and freely and not necessarily carry it as much weight and pressure. And so the book really allows us to reclaim who we are, our identity, by going back to the beginning. Where are you from? Where did you come from? How'd you get your name? All those different things. Who are those before you that have laid the path? And then what are your expectations, not by society's design, not by cultural implications, but what are the expectations from God that you
mhm,
show up and how you show up. And
mhm,
so the book really allows you to do that. And then there's a very, very comprehensive chapter, which was my favorite chapter to write, that speaks directly to organizations and leaders and knowing what it means to have such women in the workplace and how
mhm,
you treat them and how you involve them and how you rely on their experience and expertise and to stop pulling so much on our resilience and Black women. I always say, we are valued for our resilience, but our resilience was a trauma
yes,
effect,
yes,
right? And
yes.
so we had to learn to become resilient.
Hmm.
We didn't want to
Yeah,
be strong. We had to,
yeah. And
based off of the systemic issues.
issues, right, that we are facing. Now, one of the
Absolutely.
things I just wanted to chime in here, so I hope I did not interrupt your
No, no.
thought process, but you reminded me of a situation when I was in someone else's workplace and receiving some treatment, right, by a colleague when I was new to the place. And I remember another Black woman saying to me, or they were telling my supervisor, "Oh, Rochelle is strong. Rochelle can take it." It's like, but should she have to? And so I mean, at least the
Hmm.
supervisor was a white woman who at least understood, like, should she have to? But it was another Black woman that said she can, she's
Yep.
tough. She can take it. And
Yep.
I thought, you
Hmm.
know, that's something else that we have to navigate, right? Like, so
Absolutely.
the internalized depression that many of us carry with us, we carry
Yep.
on the oppression others put on
Placed
us,
on us. Yep.
placed on us by internalizing it, which means you are now acting as though you believe what they
Believe.
said
Yep.
about you
Yep.
or what they believe about you. The infamous they,
Yep.
right? And so we have to navigate that as well.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you would share that because I do talk about in the book and from my sister girl voice, like, hey, sis, we have to stop doing this to one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
This expectation that you were built for this or
Mm-hmm.
you have to be strong is unrealistic and it's actually causing us more harm. We're seeing that black women are and we have a lack of black therapists, right? So we are seeing that black women are now starting to take advantage of mental health
Mm-hmm.
benefits and mental health
Yes.
and counseling and therapy. And we came from a place where, and I can just say this openly, because it's been my experience in the black church,
Mm-hmm.
that we didn't need counseling. You need prayer, you need laying on of hands, you need a Terry service, you need oil, and that's it. It's like, I might need some
Mhm.
medication. And
Okay.
I might need some therapy. And,
Right.
I say all the time, I got Jesus and a therapist, right?
Okay.
And that's okay. But, we were conditioned to not take advantage of those things, right? And so, from a place, it's like, no, Jesus Christ wants me whole.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and so I need to take advantage. There are times where I have to use science and
Mm-hmm.
there are times where I have to use something outside of biblical lineup. Now, the biblical lineup is always going to be there. So in my book, I come from a perspective on every chapter. I talk about the historical and research implications. I'm very data driven. Then I talk about the biblical implications of such topic, and then with the cultural impact, and then the impact on mental health and wellness. And then at the end, I wrap up with some journal questions. But the reason why I said it's a labor of love is because every chapter, whether I'm talking about the faith in the workplace, faith in relationships, faith in um, business and parenting and in your personal relationships. Every chapter I talk faith in our health, finances. Every chapter I talk about my own personal experience and what it meant for me. And as a black woman, as a black Christian woman coming up and learning, I just turned I'm 46 years young now. Um, in these 46 years, feeling like I had to be this strong black woman and realizing that that's not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and what it meant for me, I mean, I had the breakdown. I had the mental, I needed mental support. And yes, I needed medication at one point. And so that allowed me to understand who I am. Um, God wants me whole and how I need to show up. And some of it is separating myself from this identity of this strong black woman syndrome
Yes.
and not internalizing that. And if
Mm-hmm.
I am going to internalize it, I'm going to internalize it from the perspective of what my identity was and is
Mm-hmm.
and what is rooted in. And
Right.
so it's going back to square one. And for me, myself, like I talked about being first generation. I am my family's matriarch now. So I
Mm-hmm.
had this, with my mom passing and my grandma passing, I had this idea of I now need to be big mama,
Right.
right? Who gonna cover the family? Who's
Mm-hmm.
gonna pray? Who's gonna bring us all together? And my family used to tease me all the time. I'm the one holding our seat on the front pew. They all out backsliding and doing whatever, but Corinne's holding our seat, so she gonna get us
Wow.
all in. And I was like, that ain't my responsibility. Y'all at the
Mhm.
age of accountability. Y'all adults now.
Okay.
I do my part. But at this point, I need to be right for me. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so that idea of if no one else, then who? But
Mm-hmm.
now it's like, if not now, then when? Right. So we don't, as black women, step into our rightful identity now. When will we ever do it? Because the culture is not going to let us. They're going to keep putting that weight, that
Mm-hmm.
oppression, that, oh, Rochelle can take it. Oh, she's black woman. She's supposed to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
What if I'm not? But then when you are presented in what's strong and bold, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, they got the angry black girl syndrome,
Right.
right? Because we could tell some business, we can challenge
Right.
some things, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's all in how you present that, right? And how you do that. And so, one that going back to that empathy driven space
Mm-hmm.
in workplace, I find myself putting myself in that person's shoes, right? What is that person experiencing right now that's making them present angry? It's
Mm-hmm.
not me. It may
Mm-hmm.
not be you as a person, but what has been their experience that's making them present angry, you
Yeah.
know? And in my case, I just finished another podcast, and someone asked me, who I want to be employed by or work, and I said I can't see myself working for anyone else ever again.
Mm-hmm.
I have to work for myself
Mm-hmm.
because some organizations are not aligned for a person like me in the workplace.
Right.
They are not
Mm-hmm.
ready. They're not
Mm-hmm.
ready for my voice. They're not ready for my boldness. They're not ready to respond to what my authentic needs are, which may also be the needs of the collective. And
Mm-hmm.
so at this point, I'll coach and I help them get there. But I can't go work for anyone else
Yeah.
at this point in my life because it just is I'm at a space where I'm I've done enough work to not live it with the identity that you placed on me. I want to live it in the identity I placed on myself.
Yes. Powerful.
Yes,
Powerful. And that,
absolutely.
yes, we could drop the mic on that. Drop the mic on that. And yes, it's resonating in my head that that's your maiden name.
That's okay. That's okay.
So,
Yes.
and with that in mind, what advice would you give to someone, looking to improve? Like any final thoughts you would share with organizational leaders, people who are not in leadership but need to advocate for themselves? Is there any final advice you would share with them before we go?
Yes, it goes back to how we first started the conversation. Go back and look at the data. Let's go back and look at our histories, look at our cultural histories, look at our own experiences. Before we make emotional decisions, what are the facts? There are
Mm-hmm.
some things that are facts, and then there are some things that are feelings. And like I said earlier, the feelings are valid, but the facts are there. Let's go look at the numbers. Let's go look at the histories. Let's go look at the organizational structures and decisions and policies and what has worked and hasn't worked. Let's go look at my own experience. Let's raise a level of self awareness. Where have I been oppressed? Where have are there places and spaces and times I've been the oppressor? And how
Mm-hmm.
serious do I need to be about changing that and becoming more consistent? And so I always say, go back to your identity, go back to your first love, go back to your roots. Take some time and really identify who you are and who you are meant to be, and that will allow you to move forward in a way where you can not only lead yourself well, but lead others and
Yes.
structure workspaces and organizations in the same way.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I've leaned more into coaching
Hmm.
in my company recently. And the more I talk to people, right, I'm helping them bring
Yeah.
up their own insights, right? Like what
Hmm.
they believe, what they want. A lot of people don't believe that they can have,
Yeah.
but yeah, what they want.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's funny. And I'll share something with you. I'm doing a lot of coaching as well, particularly for C-suite level executives. And you'll be surprised that individuals not only don't know what they want, and it's not because they don't know what they want, it's because they were never asked.
Yes. Hmm.
Sometimes they were told, you're good
Hmm.
at this. Why don't you do X, Y, and Z? You should go back to school to do this. Or you should be, in this
Hmm.
position. You should go. And you'll be surprised how many times I've said, what is it that you want to do? And they're like, I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm the, CEO of X, Y, and Z, but I really like designing shoes.
Right.
Or, I always wanted to learn to cook. I was in
Hmm.
a Facebook group, and it was an academic group. And one of the ladies was saying that they were a tenure track professor, academic. and our organization had the university had just done some layoffs and only retained that person and gave them all these classes they didn't want to teach, and now they're looking at how they get out of academia. They've been in academia 30 years. And so, someone said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And they said, "I always wanted to be a cook."
Mhm.
How'd you end up in academia? I got a doctorate degree and I got a PhD and I was good at teaching.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
But the passion may have been somewhere else. And
Right.
so the in the book I talk a lot about following the passion and not just necessarily what you're good at. I'm good at many things. I
Hmm.
really am. But
Hmm.
my passion, and I'll say this in true faith, is mothering, right?
Hmm.
I love mothering. I love mothering women. I love mothering businesses. I'm a natural creator and a thinker. And when you think about a person that's a woman that's a mother that has a womb that has the ability to grow things, whether it's a child, a project, whether it is your spirit, me, I'm a natural nurturer. I'm a natural
Hmm.
creator. And so for me, that allows me to know that I don't necessarily need to be locked into a career as long as I can nurture and create and teach. So me being an academic, I'm a professor of communications. I'm getting ready to write a curriculum for CCP, Community College of Philadelphia, in which they're rolling out an accredited program for an associate in HR.
Hmm.
And so here I am writing all the curriculum in this program. And I'm also mothering businesses and
Right.
organizations and helping them
Hmm.
grow their culture. And then I got two daughters, a
Hmm.
natural mom. And
Hmm.
guess what? I never wanted to be a mother. I didn't
Hmm.
want children. And I know it's hard for some people because there are people who desire. And for me, it wasn't that, again, going back to the identities people place on you, it
Hmm.
wasn't that I didn't want children. I was afraid because my mother struggled in raising me and she had an addiction issue and I felt like I didn't know and I wasn't taught and I didn't learn how to be a mother. And
Hmm.
so until I submitted all of that to Christ and to
Hmm.
God, did I learn how to not only become a natural mother, but these skills that I have that are motherly in nature. I grew a business,
Hmm.
I grew a career, I
Hmm.
grew two awesome, beautiful daughters,
Hmm.
and I've been able to mother other women and relationships and friendships. And if I never have any more natural children,
Hmm.
my fruit is here.
Yes.
And so, whether I have natural children or spiritual children or businesses, it is here. And so that again, that's that alignment going back to the data. Yeah, the data was there, but also the data was there from the Lord that told me
Hmm.
you can mother, and that is your natural abilities. And so my natural abilities, along with my learned abilities,
Hmm. Right. And
here I
so,
am.
and there you are. And here you are. That is awesome. Corinne, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so
Oh, this
much.
has been a wonderful conversation. Nice way to reconnect. And
Absolutely.
yes, and congratulations, Dr.
Yes.
Green.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really can't thank you enough for everything that you shared today and for joining me on this journey to center human dignity. Now, share with us how people can find you after this episode.
Yes, so you can find me on our website, which is www.hrmomllc.com. You can find me on all social media platforms. My biggest platform is LinkedIn, so you can find me at Corinne M. Green at LinkedIn. And on our Instagram socials is at HRMom, the number 4U,
Right. HR mom at HR mom number four, you.
4U.
The letter
Yes,
U. The
the
letter
letter U,
U, right?
the letter U.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Well,
Thank
again,
you.
thank you so much. And to the Rooted to Thrive tribe, thank you for being here and being willing to grow. Before you go, please leave a comment, subscribe, and share this episode widely. And
Yes.
thank you again for listening to Rooted to Thrive.